Got a great program lined up today on this Tuesday. It's hot here in Europe. Just want to make sure everything's coming online. Yep, looks like YouTube's online. Facebook's all online. Hopefully you and I are online. I hope so. Come on, let's roll that intro and I'll see you on the other side. Good morning. Boker Tov. Good morning world. It's me, Rory, Alec. Whether you're in India, right across Asia, time to dust the sleep out the eyes. It's time to wake up and shine.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Casting from the heart of Europe. It's me here in Austria. To you guys out there, a big God bless you. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's time to celebrate.
1, 2, 3, 4.
That's right, Jesus is alive. He's on the throne.
Nice to be in orbit.
And he loves you this morning. The chickens are up, the rooster's crowing. It's time for Good Morning World. Good morning world. Me, Rory, Alec. Great to be with you this morning, guys. Welcome. It is a serious Tuesday this morning, the 29th of June. The month has evaporated. Hey, listen, the whole year is evaporating. But it's lovely to be with you. Just gone the hour here, 8 o'clock European time. But you might be watching in the evening, morning, noon or night. Welcome. I appreciate you joining me, and it's lovely that you let me in to wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and we can hang out for the next few moments of hopefully some encouragement. And we've got a really interesting program today. What do you think of that intro, by the way? Imagine having dinner 100 feet up. Talk about getting your whole gastro juices excited about. Anyway, apparently it's super safe and it's quite an experience with some world-renowned chefs. You could get to have your dinner up, hanging up in the sky there, overlooking amazing views, whether it's cityscapes or whatever it might be. Anyway, on this Tuesday morning, I pray that you are well, that you are healthy, that you're breaking through, and even if you are having challenges, I pray that you lean into Him. We'll talk more about Him today. We've got a really wonderful testimony a little later on in the program I'd love you to hear. Yeah, good morning, Solomon. Solomon Phoenix from London. It's lovely to have you join. We have got a great program lined up. So what's happening on this Serious Tuesday, you might want to know? Well, on today's show, dinosaur soft tissue discovered not once, multiple times. How can this tissue be millions and millions of years old, around 65, 75 million years old? Well, today on Good Morning World, TACKETT talks with Dr. Kevin Anderson, and we're going to find out a lot more. It's 12 minutes of an extraordinary bits of information. You don't want to miss that. And then also, imagine eating something up there in the air. Well, if you missed it, you got to watch the beginning of This Morning, Good Morning World. Also, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we have a human trafficking lawyer, powerless to help her first baby. And she shares how Jesus helped her through that very difficult circumstance. We celebrate your birthdays today, of course, as we do every day on Good Morning World. Without you guys and girls, there would be no Good Morning World. And my vision and hope for Good Morning World is that I can hang out with you for a few moments and you and I together can get encouraged. Well, I think we're going to have an encouraging program today. So why don't we kick off with the first part of Good Morning World, and let's join Del Tackett and Dr. Kevin Anderson. And what they talk about in terms of dinosaur tissue is mind-bending.
What do you have here? What are you studying?
Well, this actually is not a bone. These are fragments of a Triceratops horn.
Okay.
In 2012, the Creation Research Society sponsored Mark Armitage and I to go to the Hell Creek Formation in Montana, which is a very popular place for finding dinosaur bones, and we instead dug out a Triceratops brow horn. Now, it's just in crumbled pieces now, so we can't really, put it together and show you a horn. And what we've done, of course, is have to work with it where you actually destroy portions of it. But you have to recognize that inside that rock-looking structure are tissue, cells, and protein still there.
All right, so let's go back for a second, because if this horn or part of a dinosaur had been buried for millions and millions of years, you would not expect to still be able to see tissue. But are you saying that's what we're finding?
That is absolutely what we're finding. In fact, in a Nature communication paper in 2015, they referred to it as common.
So is this unusual for those who have followed the traditional paradigm associated with when dinosaurs lived and when they died?
It would certainly be not at the least expected. In fact, Mary Schweitzer, who was the first one to really make this popularized, the first one to really get discoveries that were noticed by a wide range of scientists, she comments in interviews that she had her technicians repeat the study over and over and over again, simply because it's so difficult to understand how you could have this material still in a dinosaur fossil that is supposed to be 65, 70, 75, 80 million years of age. Because any competent biochemist knows that tissue, cells, proteins break down. They're not concrete, they don't just exist for eons of time, they break down. And in fact, they tend to break down fairly quickly depending upon the conditions. And certainly in Hell Creek, the conditions would be warm up, cool down, warm up, cool down. We found this horn, for example, just a mere 1 foot below the surface. Now, it was in very solid sandstone, so we had to chisel it out, but it was just below the surface. So there was no thermal protection by being deep in the ground. So it would have been very much subjected to fluctuations of hot and cold and hot and cold. And any biochemist can tell you that is the fastest way to destroy material. It's difficult enough to envision it surviving for 4,000 or 5,000 years, but 60 million years, 70 million years, see, that really becomes very difficult to make any kind of biochemical basis for how it could have survived. But as you can see, what we see is this is, in essence, dissolved Triceratops horn magnified. Here we have a piece of the horn that has been decalcified, like what I just showed you over on the bench. Mark Armitage was our microscopist working on this, and Mark then took a piece of the decalcified horn and put it under a microscope. See the fibrous material there? That's part of the composition of the bone matrix itself. But what's really of interest is see the white material here on the surface swaying back and forth? That's actual dinosaur tissue on the surface. See, this is not a solid fossil. This is got tissue characteristic to it. See, notice how it flexes back. And that's, of course, very interesting, how you pull on it, flexes back, pull on it, flexes back. That's characteristic of tissue. That's what tissue would do. Now, Mark then was able to extract some very thin layers of elastic material away from the inner core of the horn. But he didn't have to decalcify the horn in order to do this. You can see it's stretchy, it's flexible. In fact, look, notice, see how it's stretching? It's stretching almost to twice its original size of what it was. See, this again is original dinosaur tissue that he's peeled directly from the fossil. There was no decalcification that he did first. See, this is how accessible this tissue was. He didn't have to remove any fossilized bone to get to this tissue. Okay, now, here is a light microscope picture of the tissue itself. You can see the texture of it. And in fact, see, notice the arrows, they're pointing to cells. These cells specifically are what we call osteocytes. Those are bone cells. They're involved in making bone. And if you look at them then at a closer magnification, what we see then, this is using scanning electron microscopy, you see the extreme detail of the cells. See how well that's preserved? I mean, that doesn't speak for something that has been degrading or something that has just been in a non-pristine condition for 65, 70 million years. I mean, these structures are incredibly small. You know, this is our 20 micron bar here. See how small these structures are, still intact. And yet to see that kind of detail, then obviously the preservation process is surprising really to everybody. Yeah. But I think as creationists, we have a lot less to explain than someone trying to suggest that this is, 65, 70 million years of age.
These are real cells.
Correct.
Well, Kevin, I understand you published all of this work.
Yes,
is that right?
This work has been published. We've actually made the cover of American Laboratory. We also published in a journal called ACTA Histochemica, and that's a more technical article. It goes through and explains then what we did, how we processed the horn, and then of course draws some conclusions from that. Particularly the conclusions are that even though it's a horn, which is different from a bone, it still had tissue. Even though it was wet when we pulled it out of the ground, it had what we call matrix, which is another word for mud. It still had tissue, so just a different specimen than what had been analyzed before. No one had done a horn before.
So that has to have shaken up the scientific community. What's been the response of all of this?
The initial response, when Dr. Schweitzer first published her work, which is what became very popularized in 2005, it generated a lot of response that previous papers had not generated. And there's kind of a question of exactly why it generated so much response. But in 2005, her paper was published in the journal Science, which is a very broad distributed journal, very highly respected journal. Color pictures, you can't minimize the impact of color pictures. So you had people that would be more biochemistry and biology backgrounds that maybe for the first time paid attention to this. So that generated, I think, some not only publicity for it, but certainly some controversy. And so initially some of the reaction was rejection. Oh, it's contamination. That's not really dinosaur. It's microscopic artifact. It's bacteria, because bacteria can look kind of strange sometimes. So you had a lot of proposals of what it could be. And to her credit, Dr. Schweitzer did more work, which is what science is. She did more analytical work, dug deeper. They began to find protein. You break open some of these cells. You look at the matrix these cells are attached to, and they're protein. Particularly one of the common proteins they found is called collagen. Now, collagen is the most common protein in any vertebrate. Vertebrate meaning those animals that have spinal columns. Collagen is the most dominant protein. It's a hardy protein. But There was no reason based on any kind of biochemistry known about collagen, any kind of biochemistry of how collagen degrades. There was no reason to think that collagen could naturally, easily survive for 65, 70 million years. That you can dismiss the bacteria idea, you can dismiss the contamination idea. It is real dinosaur tissue, real dinosaur cells, and real dinosaur protein. You're now faced with how could you explain the survival of this, the pristine survival of this, not only for so long, but in very unpristine conditions. There's nothing pristine about Hell Creek, Montana, for example. It's not permafrost. It's not like these were in a deep freeze for millions of years. Like we mentioned before, the temperature fluctuations, water. Water will degrade proteins. When we pulled the horn out of the ground, it had water underneath it just from the seepage of rainwater. That's why when we first dug the horn out, we thought, there's nothing going to be in there. And there was. So these are not dry. They're not sealed in some kind of, stainless steel vault. They're subjected to all kinds of conditions that would degrade this stuff. And so then the controversy has been, how do you explain it? And if you read some of the literature, there's almost like desperation of, would you guys please explain this? Because they recognized what the implications of this could be. Now, some people would claim, well, it means nothing because we know how old they are, and therefore it just means it survived somehow, big deal. But how do you know how old they are? Well, you used methods, supposed methods of dating. Well, this is a method of dating. The tissue itself can't be discounted as part of a method of dating. So why do you say that doesn't count, but this does count? Well, it's all the paradigm drives your conclusions. The paradigm is it has to be old. Therefore, methods that give us an old fossil are what we choose. Something that doesn't give us an old fossil, like tissue, we have to reject or explain away. The simplest explanation is simply that the fossils aren't as old as they're being claimed to be. And so that clearly, this is in violation of the dating process. It challenges the entire dating process. If the fossils of dinosaurs have been dated incorrectly, which I would say this is clear evidence they have, then it's very likely the fossils of any organism have been dated incorrectly, and therefore then the geologic ages themselves are incorrect. And we have to go back and recognize that they use evolution as their control, if you will. It's the filter. If I don't get a date that fits what evolution expects, then the date is rejected. It doesn't make a difference what the date is. It doesn't make a difference how you came about getting the date if it doesn't fit the filter of evolution, if it doesn't fit what we need. If you have something that's out of the Jurassic, but it's dated at 300 million years, that can't be right. Therefore, it's automatically tossed out. Why can't it be right? Because we have, in the evolutionary assumptions, determined that organisms that lived during the period of the Jurassic are this old. And so it sets then the interpretation for everything. When you have problems like the soft tissue, see, you either have to reject the entire dating process or you have to reject the soft tissue. You really can't have both. They're trying to have both, but it clearly is one or the other. Either the fossils aren't as old as we think they are, or there's some mysterious, unknown, magical process that preserves them. Well, which is more scientific? What we know today, the tissue can't last that long, therefore the fossils can't be that old, regardless of what other dating methods you claim you've used.
Good morning, morning, morning.
Fascinating, right? I mean, it is fascinating. That was taken from the full documentary, Is Genesis History Beyond? Volume 2, Life and Design. Just check out the full interview. I've put a link in the description section below if you're watching on YouTube. If you guys are watching on Facebook, you need to get to YouTube. Go to my YouTube channel and you'll be able to find it there. Under Good Morning World, under the playlist Good Morning World. Lots coming up on this program. We've got a fantastic testimony on this Tuesday morning, the 29th of June. It's lovely to connect up with you, ladies and gentlemen, as you're sending in comments from various places. I'm still struggling to get Facebook up and running here in terms of comments, but let me know where you're watching and what you're getting up to on this very serious Tuesday. I'm just going to say this. I'm fascinated by that stuff. Now, I know it was a little technical, a little sciencey and everything else, but Good Morning World is here to bring some kind of educational dynamic as well as encouragement. And when you see information like that, so well worked out, so well researched, so well scientifically documented, it's been published in academic papers, you got to ask yourself, what else is truth out there? It reminds me of a very famous preacher that I had spent some time with in America. He was walking me around their sanctuary and he was chatting with me. It was the father of Joel Osteen. And he turned around to me and he said, Rory, by the time truth gets out of bed and puts its slippers on, perception has gone around the world twice. And I think in 2021, we live in a world that is made up of perception. And we, in many cases, just because we're so busy, we take that perception as fact. And I want to encourage you, if you're part of the Good Morning World community, as a viewer, don't just take everything as fact. Do your own research. And there's a lot of weird stuff on YouTube. Don't get me wrong. You've got to go through, you've got to kiss a few frogs before you find the prince/princess in terms of information on YouTube. But it is there, and it's well worth, if you can make the time, it's well worth the research. Yes, David, good morning. He's watching in Seattle. I'm always impressed, David. You obviously are a late nighter. He says, good morning from Seattle, and I hope you have had a great day. Listen, David, my day is just starting. Mine is just yours. I hope you've had a great day. So let's move on. Coming up after the break, it's birthday time.
Good morning, world.
On this birthday celebration, the 29th, I know my computer's going to run ahead of me here, so I'm just hitting pause button on it. The Right Honourable Reverend Canon Andrew White. Dear Andrew, the Lord bless you on this day, the 29th of June. I hope you have a fabulous birthday. I remember with great fondness hanging out with you in Baghdad. Some of the most amazing things we saw there and experienced. I pray you are well, and I pray that you go from strength to strength, dear Andrew. Happy birthday. Edward Coe, happy birthday. Annaline Harald. Well, I think it's Annaline and Harald. There's a lovely couple there. He's got the beard. She's got the lovely long hair. Link. I think it's Annaline. Happy birthday. We'll find out a little later on when I post this to you. Rita Michael, happy birthday on this 29th Tuesday. I know it says tomorrow there. It's because I screen grabbed it yesterday so that I could post it today. But it is today, the 29th of June. And then moving on, Victoria Beers, happy birthday. Joseph Gabassor Richards, interesting second name, Joseph. Happy birthday. Charles Fox, happy birthday. Deborah Harvey Winder, happy birthday, Deborah. William Carey, happy birthday. I hope you, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful day, and your family and your friends, your loved ones spoil you, and you guys have a great time of celebrating. We most certainly celebrate you here on Good Morning World. And finishing up on the special segment here, dear Michael and Caroline, I hope you have a fabulous wedding anniversary today on this 29th of June, Tuesday. 19 years married, well done. Wonderful, wonderful. The Lord bless you both. Moving on, after the break, we're going to join this dear lady. She's a lawyer. I'm going to keep her name from this, but her testimony is powerful. Take a look at this.
My grandparents are Holocaust survivors from Germany. My grandfather was a survivor, and he was also a liberator. He liberated Dachau, seeking justice for Nazi war crimes. I grew up in a Messianic Jewish home. For me, it was always very important to be Jewish. It was always very important to follow Jesus. I mean, we call him Yeshua when I was growing up. Being a good Jew is you follow the Messiah of Israel and you do what he says you're supposed to do. The thing that's always struck me about Jesus is like how down in the dirt he was in his life. You think about a Messiah who comes and we expect him to be this like big political figure, and he's gonna, defeat our enemies and he's gonna bring peace. And instead what the Messiah does is like get down in the dirt and heal people's broken bodies. He was always concerned like fundamentally with people who had no money and no power, and I was always inspired by his example. I was also interested in pursuing justice. I was also interested in going after big bullies as a lawyer by practicing law on behalf of people who have no money, who have no power, who are in situations where they're being abused. That's what I can do. I went to Thailand and got drawn to an organization that was working on the human trafficking issue. So I was working with these social workers and investigators who were looking into cases of human trafficking. So what I ended up doing for months and months was just like sitting in a dark room looking at this like revolting footage of children being sold for sex in brothels to bring some measure of justice to the situation. I was just amazed to find that like this was something that I had a capacity for, and it was something that would get me out of bed in the morning, and it was something that, it was something meaningful. When your life is going really well and like you're making lots of money and your career is flying high and you're in a great relationship and you know everything's good, like you don't need God. What do you need God for? Like, oh, I did all of that. Like, I'm so smart and special, I did it. That's kind of the attitude that I had developed. I was so excited to be a mom, and I hated being pregnant, and I wanted him out of me. Got to the hospital, everything seemed to be going fine, and I turned over and like started to fall asleep. And the next thing I knew, the room was filling up with nurses. They're coming in and like stabbing me in the thighs and trying to get my son's heart rate back up because his heart had stopped. And I started shaking from the medicine that they were giving me, and they're taking apart the bed and they're shoving me down the hall. Within like 15 seconds, somebody hit a button on the wall and I heard on the intercom, code C. What just happened? Looking up at the technician who had this like, put this mask on my face, and I said, please just save my baby, please just save my baby. Boom, I was out. And then the next moment I wake up and they're like, congratulations, you're a mom. I see his little hands, you know, reaching out of the little plastic, you know, crib, and I didn't even see his face, and I fell in love with him. And then immediately they start telling me everything that's wrong with him. Someone said the word genetic disorder. And so the next week, recovering from a C-section, separated from my baby, wondering if he was gonna be okay, feeling just completely useless. And a nurse came in probably 2 days after he was born, and she was just coming in to like take my temperature and blood pressure, and she's like, how are you? And I just like burst into tears. She said, it's gonna be okay. I said, I don't think it's gonna be okay. I think something's really wrong with him. And I felt, I was at one of the darkest moments of my life. I felt so helpless, and I cried out to God, and I was like, God, what are you doing? Why did this happen to me? Where are you? I just had the feeling of almost like someone putting their hand on my shoulder. Just like this comforting, like, I'm here. Like, this sucks, and it hurts, and I'm here. I remember going to see him in the NICU, and he's in this little incubator, and he had all these like wires and sensors, and he had an IV in his arm, and he was like tiny and gray and shriveled. He looked like a man, and it was like seeing him breathe, I could see his chest move, and I felt so helpless. Before I had my son, I kind of thought of myself as like a Wonder Woman. Like, oh, there's nothing I can't do, women rock, like everything is just a challenge, an obstacle to be overcome. And when I had my son, I realized like, I'm not in control. I'm not in control of my body. I'm not in control of what's happening with my child. This is all an illusion that I have control over really like anything. Like fundamentally, like I'm gonna have to depend on God. I literally, like God gave me this child, and he came out of me, and I like had to give him right back and be like, here you go, keep him alive because I can't. You realize like, I literally can't even get it from 1 minute to the next without God's help. 5 days later, I got to leave the hospital with him like in my arms. I put this tiny little person in the car seat and, you know, and go home. Thank God everything actually turned out to be okay. Every little issue that my son had, it all cleared up, you know, in the space of that week. I have felt in times of immense sorrow and struggle and suffering, God was there. When people are going through the most horrific trauma in their lives, God is there.
Good morning. morning, morning, morning.
On this Tuesday morning, what a wonderful testimony there. And I want to tell you, whether you believe in him or not, he knows the intimacy of your life, and he wants to share his energy, his love, his leading, his care with you. He believes in you. And I believe in you. It's lovely hanging out with you from all over the world, Namibia and from London and from Seattle. It's fantastic. It's been great hanging out with you on this Tuesday morning. Got a fantastic week coming up. Lots of things. I'm trying to finish this Nepal special, which I'm really hoping to bring to you over a 2-day period. It's quite serious and it's quite heavy, but I think it's something that we as Good Morning World, as a community, it's really worthwhile watching. It's really worthwhile getting some encouragement from. By the way, if you are watching from Nepal, do reach out to me by direct message on Facebook, please. I would love to know who you are and where you're watching from. I know I have viewers watching Good Morning World and joining us on a regular basis from the country of Nepal. You could feature in Good Morning World this week. Well, we run out of time, ladies and gentlemen. It has been a privilege and a pleasure. Thank you for your time and thank you for letting me hang out with you. I'll be back tomorrow morning. Same time, same place. Big hugs, lots of love. Remember, encourage somebody else like you would like to be encouraged. From me, Rory, till tomorrow. Ciao for now. Love to hear from you guys. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Hit that little bell notification at the bottom. Every time we post something, you'll be getting it. To all my patrons, thank you so much for your support, guys. Without you, until tomorrow morning, lots of love. Keep smiling, keep shining. From me, Rory, Alec.
Welcome home. Beautiful, beautiful.
Good morning, morning, morning.